All right, first things first, before we get into the track ranking for Wave 3, we have to move some stuff from Wave 2 around. So first of all, Waluigi Pinball. I'm going to move this down from D tier all the way up into like a B tier course, probably above Shroom Ridge. I had this in D tier before because I got really annoyed by the cycles, but I realized that it was basically just a skill issue and that I needed to get better at the game. And I think Waluigi Pinball is actually a lot of fun once you learn how to play it. It sucked when I first played it because it's so long and it was really hard to learn, and there's a lot of strats and stuff, but I think it's pretty good for what it is. So I'm going to move that one up to B tier. The next one is going to be Toad Circuit. So Toad Circuit's going to stay in C tier, but I like way overseeded this course. I think like Toad Circuit it's okay. I don't hate it. I don't love it, so I'm going to move that down. And the last one is Calamari Desert. I don't really know why I put this one in C tier. I don't know. To me, this is one of those but why though tracks. Like when this comes up, it's like, why are we picking this? There's almost always a better track to pick than Calamari Desert. So I'm moving the Wave 2 tracks around before we actually get started with the Wave 3, and now we can actually move on to the Wave 3 rankings. All right, so let's get started with London Loop. So London Loop actually kind of sums up my thoughts on Wave 3 as a whole. So I think London Loop, when I first started playing it, I was like not super enthusiastic about it because it's really difficult and it's kind of hard to learn, but once you learn it, it's really fun. But the thing is, so I think my sort of thoughts on London Loop is that it's a really fun track to play. There's a lot of cool strats that you can use. It's pretty technical. But my main problem with it, there's two problems I have. For one, like the vibe of the track is kind of whatever. And for two, there's a lot of situations that crop up where it's not obvious where you're supposed to go or like what you're supposed to do next. So one example of this is the split pass at the very start. There's like, if you try and look at where you're supposed to go based on the minimap, it's really hard to figure out because the whole minimap is kind of a big jumble. And so when you come up on the split pass at the very start, it's not obvious if you're supposed to go left or right. You can kind of figure it out because the track angles left a little bit, but again, it's one of those things that's not really obvious. Another example is after the drawbridge, there's this stuff that you're supposed to do like before you go into section 2, where on section 1 you want to go left, and then you're going to trick off a ramp, and then you're going to go into that little chain chomp section. When you're on section 3, you're actually supposed to just hang a hard right, and it's basically like a hairpin turn. And there are arrows that actually show you where you're supposed to go, but they don't show up until it's too late, and they're not really obvious. And so what happens is when you're going into section 3 the first couple of times, you're gonna start hanging a right on that turn, but then you're gonna have this tendency to want to go left like you did in section 1, but then you just can't do that because otherwise you're gonna run into the wall or go out of bounds. It's not my favorite example of game design where it's like you just don't know where you're supposed to go until it's too late, and it's kind of like trial and error gameplay. And there's always going to be some trial and error gameplay when you're learning how to play the tracks effectively, but it's like you shouldn't need to have trial and error to just learn where to go. All right, now I've been advised that I've been a little bit negative in some of my videos recently, and so I want to not be too harsh on London Loop because like I said, I do think it is actually a really fun course. And in terms of like the track layout and actually playing the track, I might actually like it more than Sydney Sprint. But again, there are some issues that I have with it, and I think the vibe is kind of whatever. Like Sydney Sprint is where it is, just because of the fact that it's such a fun track to play, and it also looks really cool, and it has that rail jump shortcut, so it kind of has a little bit more going for it than London Loop. But London Loop to me is a really solid course that I would put in A tier for sure. I don't think that it goes any lower than A tier, and I know that's kind of a controversial opinion. I've seen a lot of people really diss on this course, but I like it a lot. I like playing it, and I think it's pretty fun. So, and it's my list, so deal with it. All right, moving on to Boo Lake. So my position on this course has changed a lot since I started playing it. So the first day that I played it, it was definitely my least favorite track in the game. It felt really boring. It felt like there wasn't a lot of stuff to do, and the music was kind of whatever. I'll get into that in a second, but after time trialing the course a lot, it's actually it's a really fun course. It's probably actually my favorite course to time trial in Wave 3. There's a ton of strategies, and we're gonna see this when I do my basic training video, but there are a ton of really complicated strategies, and your hands are constantly busy. But the course is short enough when you're time trialing it that even though your hands are constantly busy, you don't really get like a lot of pain from dealing with it like you would in Sherbert Land, which is a little bit longer than this one. So I do think that it's, as far as like actually playing the track and time trialing, it is probably my favorite course in Wave 3 to time trial. Now that being said, for playing it online, it's a little bit different. So because it's so short, so there's only one little shortcut in the track that's not like that impactful. And so when you play it, you can actually do the shortcut shroomless, which is cool, but like it just feels like when you're playing online, there's not enough stuff going on because you can't really do a lot of the really crazy advanced strategies online because you need to pay attention to what's going on around you. The other thing is that there are these ramps at the very end of the track that fling you really, really high into the air. And there is a way to avoid that. But again, it's really precise and it's not something that's really safe to do online because if you get bumped at all, like you need to have really good alignment. You got to have a really nice setup. And if you don't get that perfect setup, you're just going to be screwed. So you can't, again, it's one of those things where there are a lot of advanced strategies in the course and they are fun to do in time trials, but you can't really implement them online. The other thing about the course that I think is a little bit lacking is the music. And I mentioned this in my reaction video, my Wave 3 reaction video, where the music feels kind of slow. It's not something where, like, it doesn't feel like it fits a racing game very well. But the vibe of the course is pretty cool. The underwater section is a little bit bland, but like when you're outside driving on like the little boardwalk section, it's a lot of fun. Out of the 2 Boo themed courses in this game, I would probably pick, I don't know if I would pick Boo Lake over Twisted Mansion, but I think that they're pretty close. And so I think that if I was ranking this for time trials, Boo Lake would probably be a really high A tier, maybe even S tier, just because it's really fun. I've spent so much time trialing it over the last couple days, but because we're talking about racing online, I think I would put it, it's probably a high B tier, maybe like below Ninja Hideaway. It's a pretty solid B tier course for me in terms of just racing online, which again is how my rankings are set up. So now moving on to Rock Mountain. So this is something that I think we need to talk a bit about the target shock situation. So when Wave 3 released, they didn't just release new tracks, they actually made a couple of updates to the game. And one of those updates is that when you get shocked in the middle of a glider, your glider no longer goes away. And this is like a huge nerf to target shocks. And for those who don't know what target shocks mean, it's like when you're in first place and someone is waiting for you specifically to get to a glider so they can use a lightning, and that will make you fall down and cost 1,000,000 years. In my reaction video, I actually pointed out the glider as specifically being something I wasn't looking forward to about the track, because it's like I said, you know, oh, are we gonna get shocked and then fall for like 1,000,000 years? And that doesn't actually happen. Now you just keep gliding. So Rock Mountain, if the target shocks were still in place, is probably would be a lot lower. But I think for me, Rock Mountain, it's a really fun track. So it's a fun track to time trial, let me put it that way. What makes it fun is that even if you do kind of get destroyed when you're playing online. So I have played a little bit online. I played with people on the day of release, and I never really had a bad time on the track. And even when I did get wrecked in the middle of the glider, there's huge shortcuts that can bring you back from just getting totally destroyed. And so it's one of those things where even though, yes, you are likely to come up on bad luck when you're on the track, it's a lot of fun and there's ways to come back. So it makes it kind of not so painful. Now, one thing that I'll say about Rock Mountain that I think is a little bit kind of annoying is that there is so much time that you spend in the glider. And one example of why I think this is problematic is that when you're going off the very big glider at the very start, you're in the air for a good like maybe 10-15 seconds. It's a long time. It's not very fun because you're moving so slow, and I think that's one thing that I don't really like about it. And also, after you come off the glider, the turns that you got to take, some of the strategies are a little bit awkward. And so for that reason, it's a little bit lower on the list for me. It's still fun, but the other thing is that not only are you in the glider for a really long time, but then right after that, you go up that gigantic hill, and there's not really a lot of ways to make it very interesting. So you spend a ton of time in the glider, then you do a drift, and then you're just going up a hill for another like 10-15 seconds. So there's a lot of, it's kind of too much of not enough going on to really be something that I would look forward to playing online a lot. So for me, Rock Mountain is kind of a C tier course, but it is still fun. There's still things that I can like about it, especially when it comes to time trialing. There's a lot of fun strategies you can do with the glidering, like the glider vectoring and stuff like that. So I think a C tier pick is pretty fair for this one. All right, so Maple Treeway up next, and you know, what's not to love about the track, really? It's got a great vibe. The music is really cool. It's fun to drive in. One of the things I thought was really interesting and unique about the track is that the mushroom cut, it's not like, so most of the mushroom shortcuts in the game, it's like you just mushroom through some off-road and then you end up on another part on like, you just end up further up the track than you otherwise normally would have. But with Maple Treeway, the mushroom shortcut itself, like the actual off-road portion of the shortcut itself, it's pretty short, but it takes you on like an alternate path. And I really wish the game had a lot more stuff like that. So for example, if you think like Toad Harbor, for example, where you go up the boost ramp and then you kind of go into the little apartment complexes or whatever that is, there should be more stuff like that in this game. And I think it's a pretty unique shortcut, and I think it's really fun to play. Now, like, what are the things that I dislike about Maple Treeway? So Maple Treeway, I'm just gonna go ahead and put this up in A tier right now. And I want to talk about what prevents it from going into like an S tier course for me. And the main thing, I guess if I had to summarize my thoughts, is that it's not technical enough. There's a lot of complicated strats you have to learn. It is a hard course to learn, but I wish there was more like, you know, maybe like if you could like do a no item shortcut, like a no item version of the shortcut. Or if there was just a little bit more to do. Like, I think it is a fun track. It's a really good, again, I put it in A tier, so obviously I really enjoy it, and if it shows up, I would pick it. It doesn't have quite, so for example, like Sydney Sprint, like why is this not above Sydney Sprint? Because Sydney Sprint, yes, there's a lot going on, but it also has that rail jump, which is a lot of fun. It's got a lot of shortcuts you can take, whereas Maple Treeway just kind of has that one, and it's a cool cut, but then you have that really, really long glider section. So again, it's one of those things where you have a really long glider section, then you go into the Wiggler section after that, and it's a little bit too much of not enough going on. And so for that reason, I'm gonna not put it all the way up in S tier. But again, it's a really fun course. It's one of my favorites in the DLC for sure. All right, moving on to Berlin Byways next. So this is my thoughts on Berlin Byways are kind of similar to London Loop, where it's like it kind of highlights the best and the worst of Wave 3 at the same time. So Berlin Byways, it's a really fun course to time trial. So I like literally just spent some time trialing this course before I started recording. And I think it's a lot of fun to time trial. It's got a ton of like these weird counter hop drift mechanics that you have to learn to play the course effectively. And so it is pretty technical from that standpoint. And it is a lot of fun at time trial. But like the thing is, it takes a really long time to learn where you're even supposed to go. So London Loop had that one turn that I mentioned where you're trying to do the hairpin on section 3, whereas on section 1, you kind of just went straight ahead. And Berlin Byways has like 3 of these things. So there's one turn at the very start where you're going around this really long, like this really tight hairpin turn, and the arrows that are supposed to guide you, you don't see them right away. I mean, I have a clip on my Twitch channel where I got like, I'm just like, I can't figure out where I'm supposed to go. And I had already played the course like 2 or 3 times before that. I keep going the wrong way. F this track, dude. There's another example where in section 2, right after you get off that little highway bit, you're going up this hill, and it's not obvious what's coming next. And what's actually coming next is it's like a right drift into some orange boost paths that you can go before going into this like little like park section. But it's not obvious that there's a right turn right after that. It's not obvious that you have these orange boost ramps. And so again, it's this sort of trial and error gameplay where to even learn where you're supposed to go or to even learn what's on the track, you literally just can't react. You have to just like play the course and mess it up to see what's coming. And I'm not really a big fan of stuff like that. But yeah, I think the course is really fun to play. And like I said, the vibe is really cool. Also, randomly shout outs to the Berlin wall crumbling, which is a kind of strange thing to put in a video game for kids, but okay, I'll allow it, I guess. But yeah, it's fun. I think if I just spend more time on it, that I'd probably enjoy it a lot more. But as of right now, I would just say, I would say that I would put it above Paris for sure. I don't know where it goes. Maybe above Waluigi, a little bit lower than Waluigi. It's around here. It's a B tier course, I think, for me. It's not quite as good as London Loop. There's so many B's in this one that I think, you know, this Berlin Byways goes in B tier. All right, some alliteration for all you folks following along at home. All right, moving on to Peach Gardens. So I think that this is, I don't know if it's my favorite course in Wave 3, but it's really high up there. So for Peach Gardens, like on the first day that the Wave 3 came out and we were playing this with viewers, it was one of the courses where I was just like getting very excited every time I knew that we were going to be playing that course next. And I think that obviously means that it's gotta be at least an A tier. I'm going to just set it here for now. I might move it around in a second, but let me talk about why I like Peach Garden so much. So this course really just it has everything, right? So it's got like a lot of fun strategies to learn. It plays really smoothly. So when I first saw that they simplified the maze section, I was a little bit disappointed. But I think that the wave section fits really well for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Just the fact that it's like, if you're talking about like, if you're going like the alternating left and right drifts around that maze with the plant statues of the Mario characters, it just fits in the game really well. The only thing I don't like about Peach Gardens is that it has that one blind turn at the very top where it's like you trick off the ramp and then there's a right turn right afterwards. And you can see it on the mini maps, you can kind of prepare for it, but we're not really looking at the mini maps and the races too much. And so it's like, if you're not prepared for it, you're just gonna trick and run straight into the wall, which is kind of obnoxious. But other than that, there's like a lot of cool stuff. And one of the things that I found most interesting about the course is that there's a lot of things to learn even after you've played it a lot. So for example, you can actually trick off of the chain chomps, and you can trick off of the, like when you're going into the first chain chomp section, there's these like platforms, these raised platforms on either side of the track, and you can actually trick off of those, which was not obvious to me when I first played it. So it's got a lot of really cool stuff like that. The fact that you go backwards, I do think it's a little bit of a gimmick that I don't say it loses its luster. I think it is still a cool thing to do, but it's like the novelty of it has sort of worn off on me now, and I think it's like it's cool that it's there. It's a little bit less like wow than it was when I first played it, but I still think it's a fun thing to do. It's a fun addition to the track. The thing I don't like about the backward section is the glider, because once again, you stay in this glider for a really long time and you're moving kind of slow. But you know, these are just really minor nitpicks, and I think that Peach Gardens, it's definitely one of my favorites. Like I said, it is one of my favorites in Wave 3. I don't know, I might put it as my favorite. I'm not really sure. It's really hard to differentiate between a lot of the courses at the top, because there's just so many good courses in Wave 3. But I'm going to put Peach Gardens up here for now, and we are going to move on to Merry Mountain. All right, so Merry Mountain, to me, it's a really sort of meh course. There's nothing really memorable about it, and it's kind of disappointing because, as you know, if you've watched my track ranking videos in the past, I have a really strong bias for winter-themed courses for whatever reason. I don't know why. I just happen to really like all those courses. And this is probably the first winter-themed course that I'm just not a big fan of. I know they were going for kind of a Christmas vibe, but the music just sounds like it's straight out of E.T. And it really threw me off the first time I heard it. So it's like, I don't know. It took me out of the vibe that they were trying to go for, which I know is like kind of a silly nitpick, but you know, it's just something that I noticed. Now, in terms of the actual gameplay on the course, one thing I don't like is that, so they have the half pipe section, which again, like Maple Treeway, the half pipe is kind of useless and you're never going to use it. And on Merry Mountain specifically, the reason you're never going to use it. So Maple Treeway's half pipe, what you can do with it is you can get items. If you don't have any items, you can use the half pipe to get items. You can do the same thing in Merry Mountain, except when you go around the hairpin turn, there's already items there. So there's like literally no reason to go on the half pipe at all. Other than that though, Merry Mountain, the very end of it is just a really long straightaway with, once again, not really anything happening, and it's just, it's kind of boring. That's all I'm gonna say about it, right? These are kind of minor nitpicks. I mean, it's still a fine course. It's not like something where if somebody picked it, I would be disappointed. It's just like, well, you know, it's sort of whatever for me. And so for that reason, I'm gonna put Merry Mountain in C tier as well. So I think I put Merry Mountain probably below Rock Mountain, maybe below Sky Garden. I don't know. I think I'm gonna put that there. I don't know. You know what? Screw it. I'm going to put Rock Mountain at the bottom of B tier. I think Rock Mountain is fine. I think there's enough reasons that I would want to play it online that I think it could go in B tier. I might go random if it comes up, but I'm going to move Rock Mountain back up. And that's specifically because I want to put Merry Mountain in C tier, and I think Rock Mountain is definitely better than Merry Mountain. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. All right, so last track, 3DS Rainbow Road. So I think first things first, this course is just beautiful, right? There's nothing if nothing else, that is like, it's the best looking course in the game. I mean, it has to be the best looking course in the game, right? Sorry, Wildwoods, you got to move over. There's a new most beautiful course in town. Now, gameplay-wise, let's talk about that a bit. So I think the course is honestly kind of carried by Section 1, because Section 1 has a lot of stuff going on in it, and it's really hard to learn properly. Sections 2 and 3, I won't say that they're necessarily easy, but once you play them like once or twice, you basically know what you're supposed to do. Maybe, okay, Section 3, let me correct that a little bit, because Section 3 has a couple of unintuitive things that you can do, because once you go into Section 2, you go on the moon and there's like anti-gravity the whole time. So you get this like F-Zero physics going on again. And Section 3, what you're supposed to do is actually not trick off those orange boost ramps at the very end of the track, but you're actually supposed to drift off the last one and then use the F-Zero physics to help you build up an Ultra Mini Turbo before you end the track. So there is a little bit of fun stuff in Section 3, but like there's nothing that's like really hard. Once you know the strats, you can basically execute them like, you can execute them right away. It's not really that hard, but it is, like I said, that I'm being super nitpicky there, because the course is a ton of fun. It looks really awesome. I love the fact that you drive around Saturn and then you go on the moon and do all this really cool stuff, and the fact that it's like in space and there's galaxies in the background, and I don't know. It's definitely one of my, it is, I've said this like 3 times now. It's one of my favorite courses in the DLC. And I think what I would say is, for sure, it's my favorite Rainbow Road in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And I realize that I'm going to have to actually move the Wii U version of Rainbow Road down a lot, because right now it's in my S tier. And I think the more tracks that come out, the lower that course is getting. And I'm probably going to end up just moving it out of S tier altogether, because I think the only reason it's there in the first place is because in my naive days when I was just a 200cc speedrunner, it's like if it showed up in 200cc lobbies online, it was like free points. But, you know, it hardly ever shows up. And when it does show up, it's hardly ever 200cc. So whenever you do play it, you're playing the 150 version where it's not as fun. So I think Rainbow Road, the 3DS version of Rainbow Road, is my favorite one in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And I don't know. I mean, I want to put it around here somewhere. Yeah, we're going to get to this in just a second, but we're going to put it in A tier for now. These are probably not ordered very well, but let's move on. Let's actually quickly summarize my thoughts on Wave 3 as a whole. So I think that in general, like Wave 3, I think it should be pretty obvious that just based on the track rankings, this is probably my favorite set of courses that we've gotten so far. This is a really hard track ranking video to put together. Like I said, it's very hard to, when you're talking about all these courses, Peach Gardens, Maple Treeway, 3DS Rainbow Road, London Loop, and even to some extent courses like Boo Lake. There's so many good courses and so many things that I would be happy to play online that it made it really hard to actually rank. This is the first time I've actually had trouble saying, like, you know, ordering within a tier. I don't think there's really any bangers like Sydney Sprint in Wave 3, but I mean, if you look at like Merry Mountain, right? Merry Mountain being where it is, it's above literally like half of Wave 2, right? New York Minute, Mushroom Gorge, Calamari Desert, and Sky High Sundae. It's above, like, my lowest ranked course in Wave 3 is above half of the courses in Wave 2. And it's above, let's see, it's above 3 of the courses in Wave 1. So, I mean, like, if you just look at sort of the average ranking, my average Wave 3 ranking is way higher than Wave 1 and 2. And so, to me, I think Wave 3 is pretty clearly the best DLC wave that we've gotten so far. And if the Wave 4 and Wave 5 and Wave 6 can mimic this quality at all, we're in for a very good 2023.